Welcome back to A Take on the Academy, the podcast where we love the Oscars, acknowledge where the Oscars have failed, and obsess over everything in between. I'm your host, Matthew Sprosty, and today we're kicking off something completely new. Our very first history episode. All right, we'll see if this works. If it doesn't, I'll probably do another one because I like history. And not just any history, all right? Today we are talking about the origin story of cinema itself. This is the moment it all begins, folks. What you're about to learn might win you a point at your next bar trivia night, because this all had to start somewhere, yeah? Before De Niro, before Bogart, before Chaplin, before the word movie even existed, this is the spark that ignited the entire $100 billion a year global film industry filled with million-dollar explosions, superheroes, and Pedro Pascal over and over and everything. Seriously, stop. Stop with the Pedro, guys. No. There's going to be no Pedro Pascal in this episode, or Glenn Powell, or Chalamet, or the butler from Austin. Not in today's history episode. Today, we're going way back before those men even existed. And we are talking about horses, gamblers, and one seriously inventive and maybe slightly unhinged photographer. All right, let's set the scene. The year is 1878. There's no iPhone, no Netflix. People are still arguing whether electricity is a fad, all right? And this railroad tycoon named Leland Stanford, yes, Leland Stanford, railroad tycoon, politician, founder of a little place called Stanford University. This man, he was also a horse guy, a rich horse guy, which is somehow the most horse guy of all, a railroad baron who built his fortune exploiting workers. Shocker, right? And Leland makes a bet with one of his buddies. The bet, whether all four of a horse's hooves lead the ground at the same time while it's galloping. No feet touching the dirt. His rich buddies laughed. "Oh, preposterous," they probably said, lighting their cigars with burning $100 bills, their monocles dangling from the chain in their breast pocket. I don't know, man. That's how I picture it. This is what rich guys did for fun before they invented offshore accounts and started buying American politicians for sport. So Stanford's unnamed to history wealthy friend thinks otherwise. Says, no. Says, what does it matter? Says, there's no way to prove it. So Stanford replies, oh yeah? Money buys truth. Actually, dear listener, meet me in your right ear. There's actually no recording of their conversation, so this is all me paraphrasing. FYI, don't sue me, Stanford University. You prestigious organization, you who have produced 93 billionaires so far, all right? Second place in that category. Not bad. Okay, back to stereo. Leland Stanford hires a photographer named Eadweard Muybridge. Eadweard, spelled E-A-D-W-E-A-R-D on his birth certificate. Eadweard. Victorian parents were out here inventing Scrabble on their baby shower invites. Okay, so Muybridge wasn't your average photographer. The guy was eccentric enough that even in the 1800s, people said, yeah, Eadweard is kind of different. Quick tangent. Eadweard Muybridge actually survived a stagecoach crash that gave him a traumatic brain injury. Afterward, his personality completely changed. Friends said he went from a mild-mannered bookseller to an intense, obsessive artist who would scream at assistants one second and wax poetic about beauty the next. Oh, and also, Eadweard Muybridge killed a man. Yeah, when he found out his wife was having an affair, he tracked down her lover, shot him point blank, and went to trial. The jury said, well, the guy kind of deserved it, and let him walk. Imagine that happening today. Twitter would explode. I will never call it X, Musk. You've been trying to make X happen since 1999 in your online bank, all right? People don't forget. Stop trying to make X happen. Anyway, back to the horse and the betting and the rich people and everything. Stanford basically hired this murderous, eccentric genius with brain damage named Eadweard Muybridge to solve a horse question. Great plan. Muybridge is a crazy genius, so he decides to set up a row of cameras along a racetrack. 12 cameras, all in a line, with tripwires strung across the track so that as the horse runs past, each camera snaps a single shot. Basically every 10 feet or so. Click, click, click. What he ends up with are 12 images, capturing the horse's movement frame by frame. And guess what? When Stanford finally looks at the photos, boom, there it is. One frame where all 4 hooves are floating in midair. Horse levitation confirmed. Stanford wins the bet. Rich guy, 1. Other rich guys, 0. Just a reminder, though, as we celebrate the Stanford win, don't like Leland Stanford. Leland Stanford believed in the eradication of Native Americans. He referred to the Chinese as, quote, inferior race to the superior race, end quote. Back to your right ear. Those were his actual words. Who do you think he meant as the superior race? He was a politician, a senator incumbent, a railroad baron who only stopped calling the Chinese the, quote, dregs of Asia, end quote, when he realized he could save money by hiring them over Zevites to build the transcontinental railroad. This whole experiment was this asshole burning cash just to prove he's right. Somewhere out there, that anonymous rich guy friend is kicking himself because he literally lost a horse-based science. And look, if you're going to lose a bet, fine. But imagine losing a bet so fucking hard that it accidentally invents the entire film industry. So now Muybridge has these 12 to 16 horse photos, right? He takes those horse images, puts them on glass discs, spins them around, and then projects them with his new invention, the zoopraxiscope. He starts lining them up in sequence, showing them one after another. The zoopraxiscope, yeah, I practiced that word 3 times before recording this, so I'm going to say it again for all my effort. The zoopraxiscope, fuck, I messed it up that 3rd time. The zoopraxiscope projects the images rapidly, allowing the eye to perceive continuous motion. Pictures, 12 pictures of a horse in motion. All right, pictures in motion. Get it? Pictures in motion, pictures. Genius. Or you can actually say these pictures were moving. You know, moving pictures that are moving as in movies. Man, history makes me hot to trot, you know? Anyway, here's where the science comes in. The persistence of vision and the phi phenomenon. These are the tricks of the brain that allow us to see separate images as one fluid moving picture. It's not real motion. It's just our minds filling in the gaps. But it feels real. Your eyes and brain don't process images instantly. They hang on to each frame for a fraction of a second, 1/16 of a second, they say. When our eyes see a series of still images in quick succession, or even a strobe light flashing in a club, it fills in the gaps and convinces us that we're seeing continuous motion. That's why Muybridge's horse looks like it's galloping, and why you feel like you're about to die when the DJ hits a strobe during the bass drop. When you flash a bunch of images quickly enough, your brain stitches them together like a flip book. Think about those little doodles in the margins of your notebook when you should have been learning about things in history class in school. You know, like the stick figure does a backflip. That's persistence of vision. That's also literally how animation and cartoons work. And it's exactly what Muybridge was playing with in the 1870s. So yeah, I mean, also, technically, we should point out that horses entered the industry before humans did. And fun fact, the very first movie star was that horse. Her name was Sally. Not Sally Fields, but that would have been awesome, right? Sally, horse, Fields, get it? No, before Hollywood had its leading men and women, the very first movie star was a horse named Sally Gardner. She was a standard-bred mare, quick on her hooves, and perfectly suited for the experiment that changed history. On that June day in 1878, Sally sprinted across Stanford's track at nearly 36 miles per hour with jockey Gilbert Dahm on her back, though history tends to forget him and remember her. The sequential photos of her gallop not only settled Stanford's wager about whether all 4 hooves leave the ground, but also gave Sally a kind of immortality. She became a scientific muse, studied by artists, scientists, and eventually filmmakers, her ghost still flickering through those early frames shown in classrooms and film reels today. You could check out our Instagram at TakeOnTheAcademy for a picture of Sally and Gilbert. While Sally gets most of the glory, the real hero of the first moving picture was Gilbert Dahm, an African-American jockey and stock manager on Stanford's farm. Every carefully timed shutter clicked while Dahm balanced on that sprinting mare, making the iconic images possible. And history mostly forgot him. But Jordan Peele's Nope nods to this erased figure, imagining him as the ancestor of character Emerald Haywood. Dom literally had his hands and feet on the birth of cinema, yet his story remained in the shadows for over 140 years. And honestly, I don't care if you don't like history episodes. This is why I do this shit. Muybridge didn't stop at the horse. With his invention, the zoopraxiscope, he projected those images onto a screen for an audience, giving them the uncanny experience of seeing pictures move. For the first time, people weren't just looking at photographs. They were watching life unfold before their eyes. So people freak out, all right? They've never seen anything like it. They call it a miracle. They call it witchcraft. One guy probably tried to sue the horse for witchcraft. This is the 1800s. Anything was possible. People were nuts back then. But this is where it all really begins, folks. That simple idea, stringing images together to create movement, becomes the foundation for everything we now call cinema. Without Leland Stanford, Eadweard Muybridge, Sally, and Gilbert, and horse photography, there's no Hitchcock. There's no Spielberg. There's no Marvel post-credit scene that you sat through 14 minutes of credits for only a 2-second tease of the next film. Now here's a little known twist. Muybridge's work wasn't just a science experiment, it was an art form in disguise. He went on to photograph humans in motion, running, boxing, climbing stairs, breaking down the very essence of how bodies move. These weren't just curiosities. They were the first real building blocks of everything we know today. Directors, animators, scientists, doctors, they all drew inspiration from these images. Shortly after, people like Etienne, Jules Marais, Thomas Edison, and the Lumiere brothers take Muybridge's idea and start improving upon it. Nobody in the world was doing any of this now from scratch. Film was coming from, inspired by, building directly on Muybridge's horse photo breakthrough. These pioneers of cinema build actual cameras that shoot multiple frames per second. They invent projectors. They start showing moving pictures publicly. And from there, the art and business of film explodes. So amongst the stagecoach accidents and murder trials and Stanford bets and transcontinental railroad racist owners and all that, we get the birth of film, which wasn't even called film yet. Right? What were they called? Do you remember? Moving pictures. Pictures in motion. Motion pictures. Movies. God, you're smart, dear listener. Thanks for keeping up. True story, and then I'll let you go back to your life and your job and everything like that. A couple years later, Muybridge tried to patent his work and found out someone had stolen the idea and made their own horse film. The first intellectual property theft in cinema history. Hollywood tradition starts early, right? So next time you're watching a film at home or sitting in a dark theater surrounded by that perfect smell of popcorn and spilled Sprite, remember, it all started with a ridiculous horse hoof bet and a slightly unhinged photographer with 12 cameras and 0 sense of personal safety. Don't forget about the horse named Sally Gardner and the African-American horse rider named Gilbert Dom. And that's where we'll leave it today. But don't get too comfortable. The story doesn't end with rich guys betting on horses. Next time, before America and Russia were eyeballing rockets, there was a true cinematic showdown. America versus France. Only this battle wasn't about politics or money. It was about who could shove moving pictures onto a screen first and make the world gasp. Before the Wright brothers, there were the Light brothers. But that's season 7. I'm Matthew Sprosty, and this has been a Take on the Academy. Go forth and remember, don't make horse bets with rich assholes. They might invent an entire industry just to prove you wrong.